Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at, and welcome to the DFS Army YouTube channel. I'm Razzle11, and you can find me on X at Razzle11Grinds. Going to take a look at some pitching for today, the 7th of August. It is Thursday. We just have 3 games. And you're probably wondering why I'm even making a video. I normally don't do it for these short slates on a Thursday. But I wanted to kind of give it a little different look at it, get an idea of what we should be considering, given that it is just 6 starting pitchers to deal with. Nothing to worry about as far as weather. I will be looking at DraftKings as that is where a majority of my action is. But the big question comes into, what kind of game theory are we going to take into consideration here, given that it is a 3-game slate, and that we have 2 pitchers projected at 55% plus, 2 more at 22% plus, and then just 2 in the teens. That really means that Miami and Seattle are going to be the 2 most popular stacks, without even looking at any kind of ownership numbers on hitters. I think Pittsburgh and Atlanta then kind of fall into the next grouping. I would say Atlanta for sure. So first look, I think Brady Singer's probably a little under-owned, given that he has a weak matchup. Now what do we do? Skeens. Reds are dangerous enough, so what do we do there? Logan Gilbert, the White Sox have struck out a ton in this series. He's like the obvious chalk, but how do we combat all these numbers and put ourselves into a better position for the W? Kind of go game by game here. The White Sox and Seattle. So the White Sox in this series, or I guess against Seattle this year, I am going to pull it up on my other monitor. They definitely K'd a lot in the last couple of games. They're averaging 10 strikeouts a game against Seattle through 5 games. Lennon Sosa, really the only guy that's doing damage against Seattle for the White Sox. Logan Gilbert, obviously, ton of upside. He's had some big-time performances this season already. He's had some not-so-decent ones as well, but he's pitching at home where he's been absolutely phenomenal. To me, he's definitely the number 1 guy on this slate. There's no doubt about it in my mind. But do we need to commit to 68% or 70 or 75% Logan Gilbert? I think you do one of 2 things with Logan Gilbert on this slate, and that is you go 100% Logan Gilbert, or you go in the 40 to 50% range. Still getting a decent chunk, but not matching the field. So you're underweight if something goes wrong, but if things go right like they're expected, you still have 40 to 50%, which means you're in a decent spot to still have access to the nut lineup on a 3-game slate. So that's my initial thought with Logan Gilbert. I am leaning more towards the 40 to 50% than I am just locking him in 100% of my lineups. If I would go the 100% range, I am going to allow 1 hitter versus pitcher and try to sprinkle in some White Sox guys, especially Lennon Sosa, swinging the bat really well and is playing a position that's generally pretty weak for us to fill. Colson Montgomery showing some power upside, maybe Brooks Baldwin if he's in the lineup, Tauchman, Lubob, just sprinkling those guys in and just hoping it's just 1 guy that does any damage for the White Sox. But the reason I'm leaning towards 40 to 50% is because I do kind of want some White Sox stacks. Even if it's just 3 or 4 man. I haven't decided how I'm going to break it down. I don't think I'm fully going a 5-man stack on this 3-gamer. So if I go to 3 and 4 man stacks, definitely want the White Sox. Just with the way some of them have been swinging it. As a team, they do have 11 home runs over the last 5 games as well. So power has been there, but the runs haven't. Just 21 runs in those 5 games. So that's kind of what I'm thinking when it comes to Logan Gilbert. What am I thinking when it comes to Shane Smith? He's really fallen off from a hot start to the season, or a strong start. I shouldn't say hot. 11.5 fantasy points is his high over his last 6 starts. Has not looked good since the All-Star break. Has given up 6 home runs over his last 5 starts, 1 in every start. He had given up just 4 home runs prior to this stretch. Seattle can strike out a little bit, so I think there is upside, but it doesn't feel great with the way that Smith has been throwing the baseball. Seattle comes in pretty well. I mean, they're averaging almost 6 runs a game over their last 6, but they are averaging over 9 strikeouts per game. The wild thing is they do have 16 stolen bases over the last 6 games. I'm not really sure if Smith allows a bunch of stolen bases. Should probably figure that out. Usually I dig into that, as my day progresses. He's allowed 9 in 91 innings. Just 10 home runs in 91 innings as well. So, I'm not sure, but I am going to utilize Smith. I'm using every pitcher on the slate, unfortunately. I do think I can go overweight on the 13% and just hope variance happens and Seattle comes out a little flat. I just don't like Smith. Smith's probably my least favorite pitcher on this slate. Even lower than Carlos Carrasco at this point. Next game, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Skeens the other chalky option on the slate. What are we going to do with Paul Skeens? The question, it's kind of tough to answer. Cincinnati does strike out plenty. They do have a dangerous offense, but Skeens is obviously phenomenal. He's allowed just 2 stolen bases in 138 innings as well. Cincinnati upside is just generally capped against a guy like Paul Skeens. And the Reds lineup comes in over the last week with a team ISO of just 123. It's a pretty low number. One of their hottest hitters, actually, from an ISO standpoint, is Steer, but he's also 3 for his last 22. He's had the best success against Skeens, I believe, in his career, which isn't all that much. I am more likely to go overweight on Skeens than I am to go 100% Logan Gilbert, but it's close. Him being, 13% lower owned projected than Gilbert gives us some wiggle room because he definitely, he projects as being the higher raw point scorer on this slate. So he's kind of the one that I might go to 70% of at this point. That could flip-flop as the day goes on as I try to dig in more and more. It's a big decision between those 2 pitchers and trying to figure out how we want to utilize it. I think right now I'm going heavier Skeens, slightly underweight at Gilbert, just because I do think the projected ownership matches what I think the field's going to do, because Seattle's pitching has dominated the White Sox so much so far. Both ballparks great for pitching. Pittsburgh, Seattle, very strong pitchers' parks. The other side of Skeens, Singer. Singer's been really up and down this season, but his last 2 starts, 30-plus fantasy points. 21-plus in 3 out of his last 4. Really solid trends. 8-plus strikeouts in 3 out of his last 4. Some very strong numbers, and we know that the Pittsburgh lineup is super weak. He's made 2 starts against Pittsburgh, and they have not gone very well. At least I assume both were rough. 7 point, he's more walks than strikeouts against Pittsburgh, which is really weird to say considering Pittsburgh's offense has been so weak. Some of the Pitt numbers over the last week are skewed because they did play in Coors. So the home runs numbers, the ISO numbers are up. I saw 171 over the last week, but they have multiple guys who had multi-home run games in Coors. So some of these numbers are just tough to trust, even with Coors on their schedule and the fact that Coors doesn't offer a lot of strikeout upside. They have struck out 9 times per game over that stretch. And Singer comes in a great form. So it's really tough to not want to get to Singer on this slate. Singer's K-prop at 5.5, juice on the under, which third lowest on the slate. I guess makes sense. Fourth lowest, third lowest, fourth lowest. I can't add. Behind Yuri Perez, probably makes sense. But I do like the spot for Singer, so I do kind of want to get overweight here. But I also want to be overweight on Yuri Perez. It makes it tough, and it makes it lean towards how we have to go underweight on Skeens or Gilbert, maybe even both. As we dig in, maybe we want to be heavier on these two pitchers, kind of in the middle. Like, we can get the most leverage by being heavy overweight on these guys and lower on these guys. Or we could, I guess, in theory, fade somebody like Shane Smith. Fade Carlos Carrasco, even though I don't really want to. I did pick up Carlos Carrasco in a redraft league to start him today because I needed an additional start this week. So I am relying on him probably a little too much, but we have decisions to make, really. Maybe I do fade Shane Smith, open up that percentage, but I want to be heavier on these two right here. Like, I wouldn't mind being around 40% of each, at least at initial look. That could change as I do my notes for the members at DFS Army, which I will start as soon as I'm done with this video. But right now, my gut says to be heavier on these two to gain, because it's easier to gain leverage that way. At combined projected ownership of 46%. If I can get one of those guys at 46% in my run, and the other one, maybe 30, 35%. Now we're looking at 80, 75 to 80% owned between the two in my runs. And I think that's enough to give leverage on this particular slate. Because I can see a handful of things happening amongst these three games. Last game, Miami and Atlanta. Yuri Perez, like I mentioned, somebody that I do kind of want to go overweight. 24 plus fantasy points in 3 out of his last 5 starts. Actually, 4 out of his last 6. I missed the 30 here. Great form. Does have some walk issues. Not a huge K guy, despite having some impressive stuff. But he doesn't allow a lot of hits. So even though there's walks here, his whip at under 1 on the season tells a lot. Struggled a bit against Atlanta the one time he faced them. Walks and probably hits at the wrong time. A lot of his other numbers in that start, not terrible. He has struggled a little bit more on the road. Definitely better when pitching at home. And this ballpark is the best hitting park of the 3 on this particular slate. But I think Yuri Perez has to be in play. And somebody, like I mentioned, that I do want to go overweight on. Carlos Carrasco, coming off of a decent start against Cincinnati. Made a mistake or two in there. Was looking like a really strong start. He's kind of capped from an upside standpoint. He's similar to Shane Smith for me, but I do like his matchup a little bit more than Shane Smith. I obviously will be stacking Miami a decent chunk, just because I do like a few of their bats, but they're also a team, that strikes out about 9 times per game over the last week as well. Not overly excited to use Carrasco a ton. Like I mentioned, I do have him in some season-long stuff because I needed to, but I don't want to just fade both of these guys because I think that's what the general field's going to do. So I want to play at least one of them to be a little different in my runs. But there we have it. There's our first look and a breakdown of the pitching on this small slate. If you enjoy what I bring to you, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, turn the notification bell on. Get the alert anytime we drop videos here at DFS Army. If you want to join us, get access to our coaches, tools, sheets, Discord, etc. I will put links in the description below. You can use promo code RAZ, that's R-A-Z, for 10% off monthly. And there will be a link to our merch store. You can check that out. And as always, best of luck, everybody.